Today I am out in North Carolina and I'm going on an adventure. Whether you call it off-roading, trail driving, or overlanding, if you're off the beaten path, one of the most important things you can do is have the right tool for the job. In this case, I have to have the right shoes, but when I get further off, I need the right vehicle. So what we've chosen for today is the Honda Passport Trailsport. And there are definitely more capable vehicles out there when it comes to off-road. The question is, how much capability do you ultimately need? Things like wheels and tires and suspension and differentials, those are all important, and gearing. But the more off-road capable you get, the less on-road comfortable you end up with. And the truth of the matter is, this is probably the car you take to and from work every day, and you have to find that balance. I think this is probably the perfect balance. Not just more capable than you actually need it to be, but surprisingly capable, and it's likely that you're going to run out of ability before the vehicle will. So let's dive in. Let's talk about some of the most important things you need if you're going off-road. And let me tell you why I think this checks pretty much all of the boxes that you need, even if it's not all the boxes that you want. Let's start with the jointly least important and most important, and that's going to be the way that it looks. No one wants a marshmallow of an off-road rig. They want something that looks as tough as it actually is, and that's exactly what we get here in the Passport. But this is about the 4th generation of vehicle Passport, and this is, I think, currently by far the best looking one, especially considering that the last generation that was really good looking was probably, for me, Gen 1 and Gen 2, and those were more borrowed designs than a Honda original. So what we have here is a bold front end look. And it has all the cool off-road stuff, especially when you get the Trailsport, because it includes things like your amber DRLs. And in this case, your DRLs are also going to be your turn signals. But truly, the more important thing is how this is going to work in off-road scenarios. That means things like ground clearance. That also means approach angle, departure angle, breakover angle. Don't worry, we're gonna go in studio to talk about some of those numbers a little more in depth. But not only do we have that here, we have one of the more important components, and that's gonna be the recovery. You never want your off-road vehicle to get stuck, but when it does, you need to be able to get it out. And Honda has, currently caked in mud, don't worry, we'll get a better shot here, 2 recovery hooks in the same Trailsport orange you get throughout the vehicle. I love that we're not just using more red. The orange is sort of a fun way to mix it up. And these are some pretty interesting tow hooks. The reason being is that they were designed to break away in case of a collision. And that means that this direction, the direction you would pull, you are going to be just fine. But should you end up in an accident, these are not things you want heavily involved in said accident. And coming this direction, they will essentially break away and ideally limit some of the damage that they could have caused that other off-road vehicles don't quite have. You also have a 3rd recovery point. Should you need it, it's going to be located here under the skid plate, and that too is a Honda original. I think step 1 when it comes to off-roading is going to be your contact patch. That's going to be your tires, and in this case, we have a General Grabber all-terrain. It's a 275/60 R18, which means 18-inch wheel, which is what comes standard on the Passport. Trailsports do get different designs, but the 18-inch wheel and this much rubber, that's going to be a plus. But the all-terrain tire that comes with it is going to be better for conditions like we're driving in today. If you take your car off-road with any regularity or for significant periods of time, you're definitely going to want that tire. What we don't have is going to be sort of an advanced suspension system. It's tuned for off-road, but we're not using any of the name brand components, and we also don't have things like an air suspension, which means one ride comfort, which is more comfortable than the standard Passport, and no adjustable ride height, but honestly, that's going to make things way less expensive and way more reliable in the long term. If you're interested in a full review of the Passport, don't worry, this is not our first time taking a look at it. I'll go ahead and try and throw those videos up here on the screen or down in the description, but I can summarize the way I think this looks, which is boxy is back. It's sort of an interesting combination of something like the Generation 2 Pilot mixed in with the Land Rover Defender, and actually, depending on the angle, there are a lot of other looks to it, so if there's something I'm missing, let me know down in the comment section. But what you get with a boxy vehicle is a lot of internal space. That's passenger space, that's cargo volume, and if it's boxy, it doesn't have to be enormous. This is definitely a mid-sized crossover, but they haven't made it hulking. Actually, besides the big boxy shape, which is also quite proportional, I love how wide it is as well, we have a decent amount of ground clearance, but probably sort of right in the sweet spot of what folks are looking for. 8.3 inches of ground clearance is what you get here on the Trailsport, and that happens to be the exact same as you get on every other Passport model. You don't have to get the Trailsport to get capability, but with a Trailsport comes some additional capability. If you like to go skiing, if you want a little more ground clearance to sit a little bit higher off the ground, you don't have to go get the off-road version to get it. There are some reasons to consider a Trailsport, but the ground clearance doesn't have to be one of them. And importantly for this model, and differing from some of the other Passports, is that this ground clearance and the boxiness help create some of the more important angles. Your departure angle, your approach angle, and your breakover. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at those versus some of the competition. I'm back home so I can use only the highest quality materials to show you the approach, breakover, and departure angles, and obviously take a look at the Passport and how it fares against some other what I would consider to be adventure type vehicles that fall into the same category. Obviously we are excluding hardcore off-road vehicles, so no Jeep Wrangler, but let's talk about what we actually mean when it comes to these angles. This is going to be our representative model for all off-road vehicles. This is going to be our obstacle. The approach angle is essentially, we're looking for a larger number here, what sort of angle you can get before you end up making contact with the obstacle in front of you. The bigger the number, the better you can approach this and ultimately get over it. Once we do get over it, that's where our breakover angle matters, because that essentially means how much tip and angle we can get, essentially I think coming up over a hill. And obviously what we don't want to do is high center the vehicle, so larger there is going to be important. Two big things though are going to be wheelbase and ground clearance, because that determines, well, how much room there is under the vehicle. And once we've cleared our obstacle, well, that's our departure angle, and really that means that how much space is there before our bumper ends up making contact. In all of these cases, we're looking for that bigger number, as I mentioned, and for these angles, a lot of it has to do with the overhang. The shorter the overhang, the higher the angle. So let's take a look at the Passport, and obviously it's going to fare, honestly, not so great against the other models, but the first thing that should stand out is that its ground clearance is notably less. I know we're talking about half inches and maybe whole inches, but in the grand scheme of things, it's about percentage, and it ends up being quite a bit shorter, at least in the ground clearance category. And because it has things like independent suspension versus a solid axle, then obviously that ground clearance is going to be, well, I guess more adaptive to the scenario than it is going to be a consistent number. Here's the thing, where this really falls behind is going to be that breakover angle, and out on the trail, that's something that we experience. The strong utilitarian look carries through here into the rear with a mix of form and function. We have Passport stamped here into this rear liftgate, not something you see on lots of SUVs, but a nice rugged touch that I appreciate, along with your Trailsport badging. The taillights are a nice simple design, and not only are they very clear to see, but also have those amber turn signals I know people appreciate. As you would expect, we have that rear wiper blade, and one thing that I enjoy is standard on every single Trailsport is going to be a tow hitch receiver. Now that's because this has a standard 5,000 pound towing capacity, which means most of your small trailers will go ahead and work. If you want to go ahead and maybe add a utility trailer, or you have a small teardrop, or maybe something a little bit bigger, but be careful on your towing, then great, you can load that up with your car and all your family. In this case, we're not using it for, I guess, purpose one, we're using it for its secondary purpose, and that is as a recovery point. As you can see here, we do not have a ball mount. Instead, this is the actual recovery point that we would use should we have gotten stuck, but so far that hasn't happened, not just to us, but to anyone else here on this trip. And that is great news. But if you need it, that is exactly where you'll find it. Let's open up this liftgate and see how much room we have, and sort of an interesting situation, because you might notice right away that there's a spare tire in the room. But every Passport comes standard with a compact spare tire. You'll find that here under the load floor. But on the left side of the load floor, there is a divot. Let's pretend for a moment there's not a tire there. If we have everything set flat, it's 44 cubic feet of cargo volume, and that is enormous. And if you want more, fold the seats down, that's almost 84 cubic feet. And actually, that would be a pretty good place to sleep if you go out camping and you can't end up finding a spot. But with that tire here, here's what happens. You can go ahead and order it from the accessory kit, but what you end up doing is having a dedicated space already carved out by the Honda engineers. And for anyone using a Trailsport for Trailsport purposes, I recommend getting this, because not only will it fit in here and have a nice recessed spot to sit, but also has tie down spots already included, so that this isn't going to be going anywhere. For the moment, it's free, but we actually had it tied down a little bit tighter. But trust me, you do not want to have more room and also still be stuck on the trail. And you still have a ton of room. How much? Well, honestly, enough for me to go ahead, hop on in, sit crisscross applesauce. I even have room to sit up and still have extra space. Under the hood of every Passport, you'll find Honda's new 3.5 liter V6 engine. Makes 285 horsepower, 262 pound-feet of torque, all run through a 10-speed automatic transmission. But this is an interesting segment that continues to move towards smaller displacement turbocharged engines, or hybrids, or turbo hybrids, and even a few plug-in hybrids available. But this V6 is the only engine you'll find under the hood. It's also only going to come with one powertrain layout, and that's all-wheel drive, and for Honda that means the iVTM4 system, but the coolest parts of that are really what's happening underneath. So let's take a look, and now that I'm under the vehicle, all the action happens right above my head. Because this is an all-wheel drive system per Honda's definition and not four-wheel drive, the biggest differentiator, not just for them, but for a lot of folks, is whether or not it has a 2-speed transfer case. In this case, it does not. But all the action happens up front with an open differential, and as long as these front tires are spinning, you'll be getting power to the rear. But that is important, because if there is no spinning happening up front, no power is going to get to the back. But chances are pretty slim that either of these are ever going to be not spinning, but how much they spin is going to be determined by the differential. If you want more power, you need a little bit more throttle. But when we talk about what's happening in the back, where you might expect to find a differential, instead what you have is what Honda calls their rear drive unit, which is using clutches to move power to these rear wheels and back and forth between them instead of using a traditional differential. There's a couple pros and cons to this system. An unusual fact, if these rear tires are not activated, essentially if those clutches are not engaged, that drive shaft will still be spinning, just not putting the power anywhere. But what it also allows the system to do is overdrive this rear unit. So these tires, if those clutches are engaged, are actually going to be overdriven at 2.7%. So it feels more rear biased than it actually is, considering it's not rear biased at all. It's a front wheel drive layout that is all wheel drive that can actually be pushed a little bit harder there from the rear. Sort of an interesting system, and one that on the trail it takes a little bit getting used to, but the software is what makes it all come together. Because it's not a differential, it's not based on the power coming down, it's based on whether the computer tells the clutch to engage or disengage. And that means that if you're getting wheel and tire slip and you have a tire up in the air, the car is sensing that the wheel is in the air and will quit pushing power that way and instead push it out the other direction. This only works if the software works, and trust me, this is all tuned in pretty well. And your different drive modes like snow and mud and this trail that we use extensively today are incredibly important. Time to hop inside the Passport and take a look around, though instead of doing a deep dive on this interior, like I said, we have a few other videos. I want to highlight some of the Trailsport specific things and what you as an active person might be looking for in your next adventure vehicle. I will say though, we are in the top end trim. This is the Trailsport Elite. You can get all the off-road fixings with all the goodies, which means we do have a very nice interior. And one of those add-ons is going to be a heated and ventilated seat, which is going to be really nice no matter where you are or what you're doing. If it's hot, you cool. If it's cool, you heat. But I want to start by talking about some storage. So let's start here in the passenger door, where you can see we clearly have a water bottle holder and then another compartment up front there. And you'll find the same thing if we move to the back. Let's go ahead and take a look here. It won't be the exact same on the lower end, but up top you'll find the same cup holder, but in this case 2 cup holders, as well as that additional storage bin. And that's not the only cup holder you'll find here in the rear. If we fold down the center armrest, there are going to be 2 more cup holders there as well. Back up front, one of the standouts for me is going to be this cubby area. This will also be good for a phone. It's got sort of a rubbery grip, so whatever you put there won't slide around too much. And we also have a bin style glove box that's of decent size, but at this point there are so many other options for storage, I'm not sure what you would need to put in there. Let's take a look at the center console where we have our cup holders, 2 standard size cup holders, but we also have a Qi wireless charging mat and enough room for, again, another phone. Wherever you want to put your phone, go for it. We also have a little cubby up here. In this case, it's holding my little magnetic wallet. We're not done with storage because, of course, there is a center console, and tucked in here is going to be a coin slot, or what looks like a coin slot, maybe good for a pen there, not to be rolling around too much, and a pretty deep storage bin. And then to close out the rest of the actual storage compartments, you'll see here on the driver's side, we have the exact same thing, including where I have a set of gloves that we are using if we were doing any off-road recovery. Luckily, I didn't need to get pulled out of anywhere. I know we're jumping around a little bit, but let's go back to this center console because it does have the same sort of piano key hunt and peck gear selector design that you find in other Honda models, but it also has our drive mode selector. And in this case, I'll just cycle through them. We have between Sport, Normal, Econ, Snow, Trail, Sand, and Tow. This does have a 5,000 pound towing capacity, so more utility if you want it. And when you put this vehicle in trail mode, one of the first things that happens is up here on this display jumps into our trail camera mode. This does have what Honda calls their trail watch system, and that means that we have forward-facing cameras, we have rearward-facing cameras, and all that is here to make your job a little bit easier. It's nothing under the vehicle, and we don't have a full top-down view, but this is still pretty good, and it'll also tell you where your wheels are turning. In this case, it'll tell you where the edge of the vehicle is. That's going to be the thin line, and the thick line is going to be where your tires are at. So you can go ahead and predict your lines and plan ahead, although just know anything you see on a camera is always going to be a little bit more flat. If we want a different camera view, don't worry, we have it there. Again, we do have sort of this top-down look that's going to be stitched together, but this is going to tell you on the left and the right, which is great on a tight space, where it is you're going. And if I swap this into reverse, we get the same kind of displays, but obviously pointing backwards. That's not the only digital assist we'll get, or I guess software assist, because of course we do have things like our hill descent control. We didn't have to use any of this today, but that does make your life a whole lot easier if you want to stay consistent on your way down, or you're just a little bit concerned about the traction and you want to keep your car in good shape and get everyone home in one piece. I think the branding here on the Trailsport has been done really well. Obviously it's embroidered here in the headrest, but it's not in orange, it's going to be in the matching black. And then we also do have the orange, but it's really subtly built here into the seat as sort of that accent stitching. We'll find some of that throughout the interior. For example, we'll go here and take a look on the steering wheel. We have that orange stitching as well, but none of it feels forced down your throat. It just feels like, hey, we're here. Just a reminder, this is your Trailsport. And if you ever really forget, don't worry, it's there on the steering wheel. There are so many of these off-road vehicles that scream that they're the off-road version, and in this case, it feels like it's going a different route. If you're an off-roader already, or this is what you're looking for on your weekend adventures, then this should feel like home. But there's also a chance you've done a lot more of this than I have, and if you have comments, by all means, feel free to share them, because there's a lot I can get better here too. But this vehicle has helped me a lot, and it's taught me a lot already. And I think it could probably do the same for you, unless you've been doing it years and years, but there is always more to learn. But let's talk about why this is something that you would want to consider. Because these are obstacles that I certainly wouldn't take my 4x4 truck through. I'm not so sure they'd be able to handle it. So I need something a little bit more capable. Maybe something with a better breakover angle, better approach, less weight certainly never hurts. And it is something nice about crossovers is that they don't carry the same sort of weight that you get from a body-on-frame vehicle, which makes this a little bit more nimble, a little bit lighter, and we have plenty of power under the hood, 10 speeds, and a very intelligent all-wheel drive system to help make all that seem pretty easy. Plus, I've had some instruction over the day, so it's gotten a little bit better as the hours have gone on. But even just getting out here is a reason to consider something like this, because it's not a trail drive to get out here, but it is an unpaved road, and this is more comfortable than you get in other Passport models, and generally the off-road trim is going to be the most comfortable because it's going to have, generally speaking, the softest suspension. Although if you get an air suspension, that one's more variable, and that's always a good thing to have, but here, just doesn't seem like it's necessary. And again, it's helping keep costs down. If I was going to go buy an off-road vehicle or a weekend adventure vehicle, this is probably a place that I would look. But one of the first things I think most people are tempted to do is go ahead and upgrade the vehicle. And that's where you end up with a very capable machine, but probably more so than you probably are as the driver. The first thing I think I would do though, then I'd recommend if you go look at a Passport, is to go ahead and grab the accessory rock sliders, because that's one that, as you can see, I have ended up using from time to time. And actually I've used pretty much all the protection that this comes with. We've got guards under the transmission, we've got guards under the fuel tank, we've got, well, let's just say I've heard the rear scrape once or twice, but I think my exhaust pipes are all in good shape, and that's because of the ground clearance and, again, the protection that's already there. I haven't come down too hard on those rock sliders, but I would want to bring this home. As I say that, I go ahead and scrape something on the bottom. But if you want to bring this home and have all the body panels intact, that's probably the first investment. And the next thing from there, I'm sure you could go ahead and find some sort of lift kit. Maybe not where I'd start. I think I'd start with tires, because those are going to be pretty easy to find some grabbier tires. And the system here is already ready to handle more adverse conditions, but the less you run into, the less you work the system. But whether you're a beginner or you've done this a lot and you're just looking for something that honestly is a little bit easier to drive, one of the best things about a vehicle like this and a smart all-wheel drive system is the tech behind it and the driving made easier with something like trail mode, which we have spent most of our time in. And that does a whole lot to change the slip and the control of those clutches and the differential and the power distribution, because this does have a unique way of driving and a unique way of getting the power down, but that system works. And again, if you had this and you said, oh, that makes things too easy, go ahead, challenge yourself, turn it off. But for folks who are just learning and can toggle it on and off, that makes this accessible. And I think that's what a lot of people are looking for. A way to get away, breathe some fresh air, switch off, and with basically zero hesitation. Whatever you already have in mind, I think you can do it in this Honda Passport. But let's say you don't think the Passport's for you. Okay, I'm sure there are plenty who fall into that camp. My question is, what is it you're looking for? Maybe this does what you need it to do, but you don't like the styling, or maybe it's a little bit too big. At that point, I think we're looking at something like a Forester Wilderness. That's going to be a little bit smaller, a little bit maybe easier to drive around. It does come with a hybrid option, but not necessarily as hardcore as we would find something. Well, the The Forester does, the Wilderness does not. If you need more, well, there's always something like a Toyota 4Runner. And this generation, I think, is maybe a little better looking and has a few more engine options, but I don't know if those engines have really spoken to me the way I might like them to. There's a hybrid, and it's a usable power hybrid, but not so much a fuel efficient one, and that one is a bit of a disappointment. And I'm not sure it's gone far enough ahead to be a next generation, and honestly, I always felt like the 4Runner was falling just a little bit behind. Not for off-road capability, because trust me, it is going to be able to do more than this, but again, it's the daily drivability, and it's the, I get in this car to go to work, and does that make me want to go to work? Does it make me, I don't know, happier on the way home? I feel like something like this would make things a little bit easier in that direction. There's always a Jeep, and there are a few Jeeps out there. There's a new Jeep Cherokee, but I don't think that's going to be something people are going to do a lot of cross-shopping against until maybe there's a Trailhawk, and at that point, they might be more interested. But in the meantime, there's a Grand Cherokee, and of course there's a Wrangler, and there's going to have things like differentials and lockers that you're not going to find here, not in the same way. And obviously any vehicle with a 2-speed transfer case is going to be able to, in theory, do more than this. But my question goes back to, and I'm sorry if I repeated it, how much is it that you need? And this would be about as much as I need, and honestly, a little bit more. No matter the choice for your next off-road excursion, usually with more capability comes more cost. A standard Honda Passport, though fairly well equipped from the jump, starts out at $46,245. And that comes with all this all-wheel drive system we've talked about, plus all the ground clearance. But if you want more protection for the vehicle underneath, and you want recovery hooks up front, the actually exposed ones, and you want the wheel and tire package, that's a Trailsport. That starts at $49,945. And that's not a small leap, but it doesn't stop there. Uniquely, in the Passport trim, if you want the top end model, it is a Trailsport Elite. So it is all the off-road fixings plus all of the goodies. And that means things like an upgraded sound system and heated and ventilated seating. And it includes the Trail Watch camera system, which means that you can actually see what's going on around you. And if you don't want to pay repair costs on the vehicle, that is an investment maybe in and of itself. That's $55,145, and that is a lot of money. What it means is if you were shopping in that category, there are a lot of vehicles you could look at for $55,000, or really anywhere in that $45,000 to $55,000 range. You could get a Subaru, you could look at a 4Runner, you could not quite look at a Land Cruiser, but use one in a couple years potentially. There are also Jeeps that you could take a look at. So why would you choose this one? Or what is it that you really need? That one comes down to you. But what I can tell you is that I've been incredibly impressed with how this drove. And I think if you're worried about budget and you want to start going in these off-road adventures, the best thing you can do is probably what we did today and get some training. Because that'll not just tell you how to use the vehicle in off-road scenarios, but honestly tell you how much off-road vehicle you really need and how far you actually want to go off the beaten path. Because trust me, a long day of off-roading isn't as smooth as some people might assume it is. But if you have the right car, it's made a whole lot easier. Let me know down in the comments if I missed a specific vehicle that you had in mind. There are a lot of off-road vehicles and off-road trims. The trims right now are the new hot thing. If we have more ground clearance and capability, people are interested. I think Honda has done a fantastic job here with the Passport and the Trailsport. Whether or not I like all their Trailsport models is sort of a different conversation. But for now, we'll end on this one. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't found us on our other channels, we have an EV channel, not applicable here, but there are some EV off-roaders, and we drove a couple of those in the last few weeks. You can also find us on our podcast, the Auto Buyer's Guide podcast. We have that in a YouTube channel, so you can watch us, or if you want to listen to it, Spotify or Apple Music, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Until next time, I'll see you down the road.